Welcome to Wren's Philanthropic Insights video podcast series, made to help financial advisors make the most of their clients' charitable giving. I'm your host, Kim Ledger, Wren's VP of Complex Assets. In this series, we are sharing everything you need to know about making the most with gifts of complex assets. Throughout this series, we are discussing multiple areas of complex assets, like real estate, business interests, passion assets, alternative investments, and qualified appraisals. And we're bringing in the top experts in these fields. With me today is my co-host and fellow expert on complex assets, Collin. Katie is the Complex Gift and Grant Director here at Wren. And today we're talking about gifts of business interests, one of my favorite topics. Katie, thanks for joining me.
Kim, I'm thrilled to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're in episode 3 now of season 2. And we've had a couple of other good, we had the intro, and then we've talked about real estate. So today is one that I think will be pretty popular. A lot of advisors will have questions about this because this is kind of our bread and butter, what we see day in and day out, our business interests. So let's talk about, again, set the stage about defining what is a business interest.
Right. So we really can talk about a lot of different things here. I think the most common ones you and I probably see are C corporations, S corporations, LLCs, some limited partnerships. And so we're really looking at, are you running a business? Do you have a solo proprietorship? What are you doing? What are you making? Are you an entrepreneur? How does this potentially impact your charitable giving? And can this be the right asset to use?
Yeah, because we'll work with people who are investors. The founder, often we work with the founder, co-founder, or one of the executives that holds the private shares. So I think that's probably a good distinction too, is that it tends to be private shares of a privately held company.
Yes. Yeah. Good distinction to make.
And so you mentioned the different entity types. How do those impact your charitable donation?
Yeah. So, that's really what we've talked about before, bringing in the professionals around the donor to help understand what do they own? I know you and I've had some conversations with individuals and they're like, well, I don't know what kind of company I have. Okay, well let's make sure.
And LLCs tend to trip people up.
They really do.
LLCs can be taxed in a variety of ways.
Right. So as partnership.
Yeah. Is an LLC as a partner? I'd say the majority are taxed as a partnership, but not all. Some they can be taxed as an S corporation, and some even elect to be taxed as a C corporation. So that's important to know. It's like the answer is not just LLC. It's LLC taxed as
a fill in the blank.
Because each of those different business entities is taxed. There's a tax implication to the donor advised fund. Can you speak to that?
Right, there is. So just because the donor advised fund is a tax exempt entity does not mean that there's no tax that will flow through if a gift is made. So the unrelated business tax is really the one that we're concerned about. Where's that going to hit? How much of that income is going to be generated? And so we do really want to make sure that when we're talking with the donor and the advisors they're working with to think through this, there may still be tax. You do need to keep enough liquidity in your donor advised fund to account for that, especially with S corporations and how those can be taxed at the state level as well. We really have to be careful and have a thoughtful conversation around, yes, you're going to make a gift. Yes, you're going to qualify for a charitable deduction. However, you have to remember there's still some tax associated with this. And how does that then affect you and your team around you making your plan going forward?
And the tax being to the donor advised fund.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So the donor gets the charitable deduction based on
charitable deduction based on the type of gift that they are making and the tax consequences then inside the donor advised fund. So,
but what determines their the value of their gift is the qualified appraisal.
Yes.
Yeah, which is why we're going to have those guys here for
very excited to have them on
episode
later.
6 to talk about that, because we get lots of questions about qualified appraisals and that's really between the donor and the IRS. That's part of their tax return preparation.
Exactly.
So while we need a copy of it for our records, it's really between the donor and the IRS.
That's correct.
That is what substantiates the charitable deduction.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. Yeah, good. So the business interest. So when you're talking about the tax to the donor advice fund, S corps are a little different in that we have the. I think it's the only entity where the DAF has to pay income tax or unrelated business income tax on the capital gains in addition to any income that's attributed to the DAF. So that's different than where we get just downright giddy with a C corp because there isn't
any. There isn't any. And it really does. It makes everything easier. And I think because people aren't always thinking, oh, there could be tax associated with this that the DAF will have to pay. It's just a thing that I know you and I try and make sure we bring up so that people are prepared.
Right. They aren't caught off guard on it. It's like, it does not keep you from making the gift.
No, it does not.
It just says,
you need to be aware
of it.
Be aware.
Yeah. So as we look at gifts of complex assets, what are some of the challenges that we often have to overcome? And they're certainly not insurmountable. The variety, there's when you own a business, you're very careful about who comes in and who's going to be a shareholder. And the donor advice fund is going to be really careful about, they're going to become a shareholder. So they want to do their due diligence as well. So as you're reviewing documents when that gift is being made, what are some of the things that you tend to find that we have to overcome?
Right. So we're really looking for as you said, you're inviting the donor advice fund to be a shareholder in this entity up until there's a liquidity event in most cases or some sort of redemption event. And so what does that mean for the DAF being the shareholder? So we're looking at, can it be transferred? Because sometimes that's a hurdle to get through. The documents don't contemplate transfers. And so that's one of the things that we look for going through those documents. Can you transfer it? Because some companies are written, you can only transfer it to a family member or a trust for the family member. So it would be asking if the general counsel can be involved, asking if the board needs to be involved. Can there be some sort of waiver granted for this transfer? Can your documents be amended to allow for transfer? The other thing we're looking for as we're going through these documents are, what responsibilities would the DAF have if it were to be a shareholder? Are there votes that have to happen? Are there events that have to happen that the DAF would have to participate in some way? And the other piece we're looking for too is timing. A lot of business interest gifts, depending on the timing of when it is happening during a calendar year, there can be blackout dates for certain things. So we're really looking to figure out, can we make the transfer? What responsibilities will the DAF have to accommodate? And the timing factors, and really looking for do we have enough time to get it done? Or are we at a point where we might not be able to get it done right now, but because now we've done all this due diligence and we've gone through this process, can we plan to do it next quarter? Can we plan to do it in 2 quarters so that we really have
if you're
everybody
up against a window,
everybody on the same page.
And as soon as someone begins to go through a transaction, I always encourage people to get through that due diligence process so that that's not a holdup at any point during the process. Let's get that done, and then when everybody's ready to make the gift, then we're good to go.
Exactly.
One of the things that you mentioned was voting rights. So I often get questions about that. Well, can I keep the voting, or does that have to go with the stock?
Right. So, and it really depends on, we have to look at the whole context of the situation. I think in the majority of cases, should the DAF be a voting shareholder? Probably not. And to avoid that if you can.
But if the donor has those voting rights, it has to follow the stock.
It has to follow the stock. And I know we've also worked in transactions where we are working with the donor, the board, the general counsel. There are times when that voting stock can transition to non-voting stock, and then the individual can make the gift. So again, it's putting up that context together, thinking through the timing and figuring out when's the right time to make this gift. And can the company accommodate the fact that the DAF is the shareholder?
Yeah, I've had just a few where we were unable to. The transfer restrictions don't tend to be a huge hurdle to get through, but occasionally they are.
Right.
And occasionally, and I would say maybe 2 or 3 gifts that I've worked on where we just haven't been able to get through that.
Right.
But for the most part, it's not a difficult challenge to overcome.
I think when we keep those lines of communication open, when the general counsel of the company, when the board of the company is engaged and wants to help this individual make the gift, there are solutions.
Yeah, exactly. And they get excited. And often what happens is that somebody else will say, well, I want to do that.
Exactly.
And you start with one person and you may end up completing 4 gifts.
Right, or 5.
Yeah.
You never know.
We just
exciting.
did that. Yes. So why would a business owner make a gift of their business prior? I mean, they're going through the transaction, and I keep using that as an example. There are other times that we do where donors make gifts of business interest where there's not an immediate transaction. But right now, let's just talk about that piece of it. So they're going through a transaction because it's a hectic time.
Right.
There's a lot going on. There are a lot of requests for information.
Right.
We're going to ask for information. We're likely going to have some questions. So why go through this?
Right. So, well, the first part is charitable deduction, but the
Yes.
second piece that's really important in these scenarios is capital gains tax.
Yeah.
So really the capital gains tax is eliminated for the most part when you are doing a gift in advance of some sort of sale, transaction, liquidity event. And it is a great way for the individual to save on their taxes.
Yeah.
But if they have this passion for being charitable, you're getting 2 for the price of 1.
Yes.
So if there's a way to make it happen, this really is the best solution. There have been times when I've been on calls with individuals and their advisor, and things are moving very fast. And that is one thing I want to make sure these potential donors are aware of. If this is too much, we don't have to do it this way. Or we can push pause for this if you know there's going to be a secondary transaction. But if you can be in it for the long haul, which is really usually just a few weeks of hectic, this is such a great way
It really
to be
is.
able to participate.
So who needs to be involved?
Right.
So obviously you need the people from the complex asset group at the donor advice fund, which is us.
Right. And we're super excited, and we can help build that table with the donor and their input. So we're looking to see, like, who's helping you with financial planning, who's helping you with tax planning, and who's helping you with your estate planning. All of these pieces have to go together. And sometimes it will be financial planning and your investment advisor, because what are we going to do with the cash that's generated from this sale? Because yes, you're donating a piece of it, but there's also going to be some for you as an individual. So it's really putting all those people together to make sure that the best outcome is happening.
Yeah. And it's not unusual to have the general counsel or
goodness.
CFO from the company on those calls as well. Sometimes it looks a little bit like, the old Hollywood squares.
Right.
You've got the,
Your
9 people
squares across. Yes.
on the screen. But I love that because everybody is working towards the same goal in the most efficient way possible. And there are no surprises.
Right. And then when the general counsel's on board from the beginning, if you do have to adjust documents or draft any sort of waiver, I've done that. You've done that. You work behind the scenes with the general counsel, getting all of that approved so then it can get to the board right away, and then everybody can sign in advance. And
yes. And I've worked with some engineering firms that where they've had to make changes to the documents, and it's taken a long time because it's a significant shift for the company to allow someone besides an employee to be an owner, and to understand that they can't force the DAF to sell it.
Right.
So
let's
talk about assignment of income.
Oh, assignment of income. Yes.
Yeah. When I say assignment of income, what do I mean by that?
Yeah. So we really want to be careful of how is this transaction happening, timing of this transaction happening, because if we are too far along in the process, are you then in jeopardy of not being able to get your charitable deduction? Yeah. Are you at that point in the sale transaction where is it so far along that it's so predetermined you can't unwind from it?
Right.
It's more likely than not, and I think I'm not remembering the right word there, but so certain to happen.
All but certain to occur.
Yes, yes, there it is.
I use that phrase on a daily basis.
Yes. Such that you can't, like I said, you can't really unwind from it at that point. Mm-hmm. So you're going to run up against IRS rules, case law that says this isn't allowed.
Yeah, that it's
too
you're
far along.
assigning income that should be coming to you. So there needs to still be some points of negotiation in the deal. And once it's all set, you're done. You're too late.
Right. And, I've had that happen, unfortunately, where someone has come forward and said, okay, purchase agreement is signed. I'm ready to make my gift and save my capital gains tax. And I said, we really need to have you step back and talk to your tax professional because this seems like it would be too far along, that you've passed the point of no return. Right. You are really in jeopardy of an assignment of income and you need to take a step back. And then when I've reached out in a couple of weeks, they're like, you were right.
Yeah.
I'm like,
well, and that's a really good point too, is that I'm not going to make a recommendation on that. You're not going to. The financial advisor's not going to. The donor needs to work with their tax professional, their tax advisor, on the timing of the gift.
Right.
Because, again, like the qualified appraisal, that's between you and the IRS.
Right.
It doesn't affect the charity, but it is important to get that tax advice.
Right. And we want to help them be aware that these things come into play, but we can't give specific legal and tax advice.
Does the IRS put any limitations to the donor advice fund? I know donor advice funds, obviously they, the whole goal of a donor advice fund, we talked about this in our first episode about the need for liquidity. So, that's what we're looking forward to. But does the IRS force that as well?
Right. So there's nothing on the books right now that says your donor advised fund has to hold 50% of liquid assets and can only hold 50% in anything alternative. However, there's a lot of talk about that. I think it's important for people to understand. And because donor advised funds are there to make grants, a lot of organizations have some sort of guideline in place. We'd love you to make a grant every 2 years, every 3 years. If there's a process in place for your charitable giving and you need to, or you have items that are happening, such as a sale of a business or other things, or maybe using a passion asset to put funds in your DAF, it's not a black and white rule for most donor advised funds, but it is something that's being discussed. It's really important to keep up with legislative updates. It's really important to keep up with your local estate planning council, your local plan giving council, and other outlets that might be able to shed light on where this is going. Because there have been proposals.
Yeah.
They just haven't gone anywhere yet.
What about excess business holdings?
Oh, excess business holdings. Oh, Kim.
Well, we could spend an entire thing on excess business holdings. So let's not even try to get
too weedy
on this. Let's just, at a really high level,
right?
Let's talk about excess business holdings. It's a really complex.
It is really complex.
And it's like you've got to put your right hand on the top of your head and hold your left leg, and then it's not. I don't know. There are a lot of rules around it. I'm making a little bit of fun of it, but just, again, super high level.
Yeah. So it's really important to understand just how much is in the donor advised fund, just how much of a business interest might be held still then by that individual donor, by any of their related
about
family members.
Ownership of the business?
Yes.
Okay, not
of the interest.
Not how much of the DAF is the business, but how much the DAF owns of the business.
Yes,
okay.
yes. Thank you for clarifying there. I want everybody to follow along. So really thinking through this ownership structure, because that's what is going to trigger excess business holding, and thinking through, if the gift is made and the DAF only owns 2% or less, you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. If the interest is going to sell quickly, you're going to be okay. It's these long-term holds when
deals fall through.
They do. And that's, you and I talk about all the time. Worst case scenario,
right.
What happens if this gift of this business interest doesn't go through? Mm-hmm. How much does the DAF own percentage-wise? How much does the original donor, their family members, trust for themselves or their family members? Because there's a 20% threshold that we're trying not to hit.
In a 5-year time frame. So we just have to make sure that we look at all of that.
Right.
So that's just another consideration.
Right.
And making sure you have some plan Bs and Cs out there.
Exactly.
And there are some.
And again, it goes back to the communication that we've talked about before. Let's make sure everybody understands what's going on so we have our plan B, we have our plan C, and we can make sure if things aren't moving forward the way they're expected, how can we overcome some of that and have a solution ready to go?
Got it. Well, I know we've covered a lot today, and we could probably go on another 30 minutes.
Or more.
But our time is up for the day. And so I appreciate you joining me today, Katie, and discussing business interest gifts.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for watching, or if you turned in via podcast, thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about Wren and how we might be able to help with your philanthropic program needs, visit wreninc.com or email us at consulting@wreninc.com. We'd also love to hear if you have questions or topics about planned giving you want us to talk about. And of course, don't miss the great information we have in our Advisors Philanthropic Insights newsletter. Sign up at wreninc.com/advisor insights. Find all the links mentioned in this show in the description. And you'll find expert tips daily on our social channels. Check it out. Until next time, I'm Kim Ledger. Give wisely.